Hixanar 28 has a comment about your Joy-Con endeavor or buying another Switch. He says GM money, baby, which I know that we hear a lot here. But yeah, so I just thought I'd shout that out real quick.
Can we talk about the NES game stuff real quick?
Yeah. Let's cut over to the future of Virtual Console and all.
Because I think this is super cool. I think it's weird that we only know part of the lineup so far, but for the stuff we saw in there's Dr. Mario, there's Zelda, there's Mario 3, and they're adding online functionality to a lot of that.
Right.
And makes sense for most of them already had.
Yeah.
Multiplayer, but Zelda didn't. So I'm really
But that feature is awesome. No, that feature is so cool.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
You can play the game single player with the friend watching you, and whenever you want, you can hand the controller to them virtually.
No.
It's freaking awesome.
Oh, wait, virtually?
Yeah, so they literally...
You are spectating, you're spectating me playing, and I can say, all right, Casey, you take over. And you play at home and play my save.
That is awesome.
They're literally calling it like pass the controller.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of like how PS4 players have the option to like share a game.
Yeah.
Like, what is it, for 30 minutes or something? Well, this apparently doesn't have a time limit, so you could pass the controller.
It's so cool because it's like when you were a kid and you're playing with your friend on the couch, and like you get to a point you're like, all right, fine, you play. Or you play Mario Brothers, which you can do the handoff too, where every time you die, you give the controller to your friend. Well, now you just do it online.
That's
you guys
really
are
cool.
playing the
Super
game
cool.
together.
Yeah. And so what about like, I mean, there aren't a ton of sort of like couch co-op multiplayer games on the NES that fall under the sort of the compartment of Nintendo first party stuff, right? Because that's something it's worth noting here. We've only seen first party stuff as part of all of this. And we'll get into that conversation about Virtual Console later, but I imagine that's going to be what things look like for a while because that's just the nature of things now. I think everybody's figuring out how to make their own money on the side. But for stuff like that Nintendo makes that's like, there's like, I don't know, Balloon Fight is one of them where two players can play at the same time. Stuff like soccer and tennis, I believe.
Golf,
Golf. Actually, I think golf is single player.
Is it?
Yeah.
You can still pass the controller though.
Yeah. But
you want to spectate me while I play golf? And we'll pass the controller.
it is the best spectating sport, right?
Can someone spectate me while I stand up and fall asleep and hit my head on the floor?
But we don't know. They might also add some leaderboards or some time challenges to the mix, right?
And so I think like stuff like Dr. Mario is going to work like that. That's going to be really cool to play online in the same way you can play like Puyo Puyo Tetris with people online. Like to have that with an NES game, Dr. Mario, is like really interesting to me because they are not redoing the graphics. They are not like re-releasing these games in HD. I mean, you don't need to. They're pixel perfect, right? So yeah, it'd be really cool to see what they do with that kind of stuff. And I think from there to see how often they roll out more of them. Like, are they giving us 20 at once? Do they go away the second I stop paying for it? Like,
all of that is unknown. I'm assuming it's just a library that keeps growing over time, but you never know. They might go yoink and take one away. The notable part is that they call this Nintendo Entertainment System Nintendo Switch Online. Very unwieldy name, of course, but it has little TMs and Rs and everything on there. But the fact that they make this so explicitly NES is interesting to me.
Right.
Yes.
Right? Like they didn't pick a title that kind of left the door open for Super NES or N64 or Game Boy. Or maybe that is another season that gets layered on top where now suddenly you have Nintendo 64, Nintendo Online or whatever.
I would be fine.
We don't know.
I would be fine with that as long as they don't raise any prices or like add any extra fees. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Are they going to cycle out the games that are available, or are they
I
just going
mean,
to keep adding them?
I don't know. I mean, the only contemporary example we have of something like this is kind of like the PlayStation Plus business model.
And the games disappear, but you accumulate.
Yeah,
right?
you accumulate them, and all you have to do is basically sync a download, like tell your system or on your web browser, I want Beyond Two Souls and Rayman Legends, and they just get tucked away in your shopping
In your library. You don't
your
have to
library.
download them.
Your system effectively treats them. Your account treats them as transactions that you purchased. You get a receipt in your email for $0.00, and they are in your library forever until you stop paying for PlayStation Plus. But then you can let your account lapse for a bit, I believe. Repay, get back in, and then keep going.
I know for cloud saves, it's 6 months.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the same for the library. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. Who knows?
For this, yeah.
But right now, we only know NES games. I imagine we'll get more later. I don't think we're going to get as far as GameCube and stuff like that. Who knows? I mean, I think GameCube emulation in general is kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, there's a huge library of Game Boy and DS and N64, Super NES,
yeah.
Virtual Boy if you want to play red games. No, but before you even have to go to GameCube, and that's what's so weird about this plan. This sounds so NES focused. I mean, they're definitely celebrating their kind of like their classic heritage with this.
Yeah. I saw you said DS. I saw somebody a while back mocked up a like sort of like a Switch thing that rotated the screen so it's vertical and had the Joy-Cons on the side.
Oh.
So you could basically play with like a giant touchscreen in
Yeah.
the middle.
Yeah.
So that's one way to do it. That's better than playing them on your TV through a Wii U,
Yeah.
which was like just not
amazing.
great.
Well, let's go ahead and start another poll for the chat. I want to ask the question: do you think Nintendo made a mistake by ditching Virtual Console for Switch and announcing the new Nintendo Classics system? Yes or no, essentially. Because I think that this, at the end of the day, is almost a reboot for Virtual Console. I think it's almost like a rebranding. I wrote an article about it a couple days ago when Nintendo announced it, and that was sort of my angle. And I'm really kind of sticking by that because I think it makes a lot of sense from a business perspective, and I think that's maybe how Nintendo is looking at it. Because like for the average person out there, as far as Virtual Console is concerned, it was basically an a la carte system, right, where you could buy games individually, right, from the Virtual Console.
And new ones would be released.
Right. And so
month.
so obviously there's a lot of hardcore Nintendo fans out there like us that would buy a bunch of them. But then there's also those other people out there who are more casual players that would buy like the big ones like Zelda and Mario and maybe Donkey Kong, and then that's it.
We saw like basically sales charts for them. I believe Nintendo was pretty open about that, and there might have been a way to like tabulate that on the old systems. And all the games you just named were always at the top.
Right.
Like it was never even a guess.
So what I think is like, if this is a system where they keep adding more games to the mix, they're just essentially getting everybody's money. 85% of our chat's $20 every month, year, essentially, right? So at the end of the day, this could mean more money in the long run for Nintendo because people would essentially continue to pay for it, whether or not they are playing those games, essentially.
I mean, yes and no. I would say for a power user like everyone sitting here, I would have given them way more than $20 a year for Virtual Console games. I have.
Right.
I mean, they were selling NES games for $5 a pop, and they're giving me 20 for $20.
Yeah.
And I would have bought 20 of those for $5 each. You know?
But again, like they're limiting it to NES right now. I'm curious to see if this plan will expand to some of the later games, or if that will be treated completely separately, where they will release an N64 game for $5, like that,
Yeah.
just in the eShop.
Maybe
Yeah.
they'll
we
they'll
don't know.
release more games outside of what's free, and then offer people who have Nintendo Switch Online a discount for
Yeah,
them.
yeah. I'm pretty torn because like gaming history preservation is something that I care about. You know, as like a person getting older and watching games disappear, and especially games that are online now, they just go away for good. So preservation is important, but in terms of kind of a first party or third party publisher deciding how to retell the story, re-releasing one of their classic games, there's so many ways they can do that now that aren't necessarily just dragging and dropping them onto the eShop. Also, this online stuff is setting a precedent that has to happen for every single game.
Right.
Whereas with some games, like the Zelda Pass the Controller thing is really cool, but I don't necessarily need that. And if that's going to hold back the development of porting A Link to the Past so I don't have it on Switch in the next 2 years, then that kind of sucks, right? I look at companies like Square Enix, Capcom, Konami, companies that are constantly... Yeah, thumbs up to them. Constantly re-releasing their classic games in different ways, right? A lot of them are putting them on, they're basically just putting them out as downloads. Some of them are putting them on iOS. Some of them are remastering them. Square recently took Secret of Mana and a bunch of other games, packaged them in a collection.
Sega Ages is on
Yeah,
its way.
Sega Ages.
With Dreamcast games, by the way.
Capcom is putting basically every Mega Man game that they ever made on the NES and Super NES on Switch by the end of the month in big, hearty collections. So I don't ever see the Virtual Console as we know it being the way it used to be in terms of everybody coming together and playing fair.
Right.
And I bring up Netflix because Netflix is a company that when they first started, everyone was playing with. Warner Brothers had movies there, Disney had movies there. Little by little, people thought, oh, we can get our own little share of the streaming pie, right? And we can get our own piece of the puzzle here.
I hate that.
Yeah, and
It'll happen with Disney, right?
it sucks for us, and it's why you saw Netflix ramp up production of their original independent content, and why everybody has their own thing now. And so I think that's why we're seeing so much first-party stuff here,
Right.
Yeah.
which is cool for us because we know it and we know what's going on, and we
There's
love
a
these
finite
games.
supply, though. That's
Right.
that's
It's
a
also,
challenge.
you mentioned casual gamers. A lot of casual gamers are like, oh, I used to have a Nintendo. Nintendo made Contra. They made Castlevania. They start naming all these things that they kind of like merge in their head as
Games
first
not actually
party.
made by Nintendo.
Right.
Yeah, and they weren't, So when they go to look for those things, they're not there. And then it gets kind of dicey.
But we'll see. I mean, Nintendo has. We're at the start here. We don't know everything about this platform, and
Yeah.
we may very well see that kind of stuff where, like 1 month, maybe Konami month or something, and you get your Contras or
Yeah.
something, and maybe they rotate it out the next month, and those games are no longer owned or accessible by you, and then Konami can still do their own collection. Like I think there's a lot of flexibility here with a subscriber service.
Yeah, maybe they'll only be available for a limited amount of time, as like every month, as like an extended demo, and then you'll have the option to purchase them at a discounted. This is complete speculation.
Yeah,
I was trying to think of.
No,
how
I
it
hope
works.
that is the case. I do hope it's not one of those things. So on the Nintendo 3DS, if you bought it early, good for you. You unlocked the ability to pay way more for that system than anybody else. I was there.
You got the ambassadors.
We got an apology certificate that stayed on our systems for a very long time. But we also got access to something like 6 Game Boy Advance or Super Nintendo games.
Super NES, yeah. Good ones.
And they're really good ones. And they stayed there forever, but there was no other way to get those on that system.
Yep.
And that's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
And so I
was
don't.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool for me because I was there. I had my like sadness JPEG to prove that I spent more money. But most people could never access those, and so people would ask me like, "How do I get those games on my system?" And I'd be like, "You don't."
You go pay a crazy amount of money to someone else who owns a system.
Yeah, who owns a system? Exactly.
Well, you buy a Super NES Classic,
Yeah, you get one of
and
those.
you're sitting in front of your TV.
I mean, so I guess that helps those people, right, in that situation. But I just hope it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, you want to play Contra? Cool, we have it this November, but then in December it's gone forever. And if you weren't there in November, you just don't get to play Contra.
See, I kind of like that. Like as long as there is some way to access those games beyond the subscription,
Yeah.
right? Like
Right.
Konami releasing that game as a download separately, and that may very well happen. They're just one-offs that you can download also for $3
So then,
without the handoff feature, obviously.
Real quick,
it'll never be $3, by the way.
before we go any further, I just want to say we got poll results in, and 61% of you say no, we're good. As in regards to Nintendo making a mistake by ditching Virtual Console for Nintendo Classic. So most people seem to be okay with it, which is nice. I personally am okay with it. I think it's fine. It was a huge surprise, but
I think it's just a name.
yeah, it's a name at the end of the day.
And the reality is that, like, in the same week, they basically said, hey, we're not really focusing on that name right now. They announced that 20 NES games are coming to the system. So that's acknowledgement that people want classic games. They have a system in place for them. How that plays out, we'll see. But what they call it is irrelevant to me.
So that was just a small taste of this week's episode of NVC. But if you want to join us for our full live show, head on over to IGN.com every Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Or if you miss that, you can head on over to YouTube the following day, which is a Friday. Or, yeah, because it's not Thursday, it's Friday.